Okay, hi everyone. This is Maryam Henein, investigative journalist, functional medicine consultant, best known for directing the film Vanishing of the Bees. And I am here with Robert. I'm not going to pronounce your name. Is it Arce?
Yeah. For the non-Spanish speakers, they pronounce it as Arce. I speak Spanish. It's Arce.
Arce. Robert
Arce,
Arce,
yes. Yeah,
a
Arce.
retired Phoenix police detective with extensive experience overall, which we'll get into, including working with, has experience with Mexican organized crime. And so I'm on my chapter in regards to George Floyd, where I'm looking at counterfeit bills and counterfeit pills and looking at the Mexican cartel in Minnesota, which someone called Mordor, Larry Pinsky, who's a Black Panther, and I came across your name. I'm kind of doing a crash course, Robert. So let's start with your extensive experience.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. Joined the Phoenix Police Department when I was 21 years old. And like all cops, we all have to start and work the street. And I like to say, in a way, I was very fortunate, but yet it was kind of sad, is that I was a street cop during the cocaine explosion when the crack cocaine hit the streets of Phoenix in the early 80s. So I went from a street cop and got to see firsthand the destruction of crack cocaine was doing, especially in the inner cities. And that crack cocaine was being moved into Phoenix by Mexican drug cartels and then distributed by local street gangs. So I did that for 4 years, patrolled, and I went to narcotics. I always wanted to be a undercover narcotics cop. And being a Spanish speaker, I got to do it. So I started out as a street level guy, then went up, started doing what we would call more mid-level to major violators. And they were, being a Spanish speaker, I worked primarily Mexican drug gangs that were here illegally in the U.S., moving multi-kilos of cocaine, heroin, uh, large amounts of marijuana. Then later on, they got into the meth. Um, so I did with Phoenix PD. I did the undercover stuff. I went work gang squad. I did time with DEA, their task force group. I did 5 years over at the FBI on a organized crime, violent street gang task force, which we were primarily doing wiretaps on Mexican or on street gangs that were being supplied by Mexican drug connected gangs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, at the tail end of my career, in between there, I did a lot of human smuggling with an ICE group. I got assigned to work ICE. I did human smuggling during what we called the super drop house era. We were hitting houses with 160 undocumented migrants in a house, 180, uh, and that was in the early 2000s, about 2003, 2004, 2005. We were also doing a lot of kidnapping cases. Phoenix was the epicenter for kidnappings here, and they were all almost 99.9% were primarily illegal Mexicans or Central Americans against other illegal groups, all tied to human smuggling or the drug trade. And we were having probably 200, 250 kidnapping cases a year here in Phoenix. So I got to
Wow.
work that. I retired.
Can I
Sure.
interject and share a story? When I was making Vanishing of the Bees, one of the beekeepers, Dee Lusby, lived in Arizona, and it's a very small town, which I don't recall. But she took us like in the boonies to show us her hives, and I remember seeing a Mexican literally like with a stick with two buckets, and we
Right.
had some food, and I said, "Can we give him some?" Can we give him some fruit? And she's like, no. She got so upset with me. Don't talk to them. She just didn't want any interaction because she was off the grid and she didn't want any interaction with the police. Later, the car broke down. I mean, long after this man left, and I wanted to call the police. We had no reception, and she snatched the phone from me and she said they will only come for you if they're taking you to the hospital and you're bleeding, or they're going to take you to jail. So it was a weird, to not want to help someone.
Yeah, you were probably down in southern Arizona, close to the border then, right? Close to the Mexican border, I'm
Hmm.
guessing. Yeah, there's areas down there that are very dangerous because what happens is that I've been down there and met with ranchers, with owners who own large ranches that their properties butt up against the Mexican border, and there's no barriers down there. There's like some little fence that you could walk over,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens is different smuggling groups, either smuggling people, primarily a lot of them are smuggling people, and they're coming through these properties, but they're armed. They'll have guides with that are protecting their loads because there's other groups out there that try to steal the human loads to take the money. So they'll take a group of 10 or 15 people from the human smugglers, so the smugglers have to protect their human cargo so that they don't get ripped off. And then occasionally you'll have these groups that, for part of their payment, they'll carry a backpack with some dope in it, and here they come, so they're having to protect those loads. So it's dangerous because if they think you're law enforcement or they think you might interfere with their operation, it could be very, very dangerous, usually at night. So those groups usually move at night.
Got it.
So yeah,
And when you're saying smuggling, are they smuggling children from Mexico?
it's primarily those people that are being smuggled are people for to get in illegally into the U.S. and work. Now you have a lot of the unaccompanied minors, but in those days it was primarily for work purposes. You know, people are would leave Central America or leave parts of Mexico, get to the border. They hire guides that know the desert and
Mm-hmm.
know how to get them to different paths. And in some spots they would travel 2 days and 3 nights to get to a pickup location. And at the pickup location, there's vans, trucks picking them up, get them to Phoenix. Then they were calling families in the East Coast, in the Midwest, in the South, California, whatever, to send money via Western Union. And then
Wow.
a unofficial super shuttle system would load them up and take them to their destination. Just earlier in the week, there was a truck that rolled over, and I think 9, 10 migrants were killed. Quite a few of them were killed or at least hurt. It's very common because these trucks, these load vehicles, once they get to a drop house, like a safe house, and the payment is made, they'll
Yeah.
load them up. And what they'll do is a lot of times they'll take all the they'll take the seats out of a, like, say, SUV, except for the driver and front passenger seat, and everybody else lays in the back. And they'll load them up, and then the two drivers will drive all night and all day. So they're taking meth to stay awake because they got to drive to North Carolina, they got to drive to New Jersey. They're not going to stop anywhere, and they're just gassing up, and they're driving like bats out of hell. And if they fall asleep, they roll over, and everybody gets ejected. It's real. It happens. There was another one I think that happened in San Isidro, California, where I think 15 of them were killed. They ran into a cement truck.
Wow.
So
So before we get into the Mexican cartel, just curious, I'm sure you have an opinion and information. When the notion of building this wall first came out, I personally thought it was a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs to go to that extent. I think it's even more crazy to have built something to whatever extent, and now it's like a scene out of the film Divergent where you have half a wall in a dystopian sci-fi. So what's your opinion on the validity of that wall initially, and where we're at now with like letting whoever come in?
well, the wall was only part of the solution to me. I've worked human smuggling. I think first of all, I think our politicians need to fix our immigration system, and we have to stop. Uh, how can I say this? I'll go with the wall first.
Yeah.
With the wall, I think there's areas that are very. It's important to have the wall to protect our. I mean, it's when I was working. When I was working at the FBI, we were doing a wiretaps, and we would have surveillance aircraft in the middle of the night go out to the desert because we're following load vehicles that are going to head down to the desert and pick up drugs and bring them back. So we're having surveillance on them on the ground, but they always think that they're being followed, so they'll take down the road, make a U-turn, wait and see if they're being followed. So it's very hard to follow them if they think they're looking for a tail. So we would use aircraft that they could not see because it's so far up and it has really sophisticated equipment that we could track them. Well, this aircraft would go out there, and on the mountaintops out in the desert right along the border to the infrared, you could see spotters. The cartels have spotters up on the hilltops, and you can see they have rifles. They're sitting out there because they're watching a smuggling route because they have to protect it. So they know that once the sun goes down, they have spotters looking to see, all right, where's Border Patrol? All right, Border Patrol just did their rounds. They won't be back for another hour, half hour. Here comes the load.
Okay.
Here comes drugs. Here comes people. Here comes maybe a high value person that the cartels want to smuggle into the U.S. to run business. They're not going to send him with a regular load. They're going to protect him. So they're going to have armed guards that are on U.S. territory coming through the southern Arizona desert, and it's wide open out there. So with the cameras that we're looking down, the night is alive. There's so much activity out there where they're like, that this group here is not even us. Our group is over here. So started seeing that, and in the late 80s, early 90s, because of the uncontrolled immigration in Phoenix, the violence has skyrocketed. We went from, Phoenix is always, we're a big city, but we're always kind of like a small big city. We didn't have the big city crime that a lot of the other cities had. Our homicide rate was always very low. And suddenly we went from having less than 70, 80 homicides a year to 220 homicides a year. We went from our investigators being able to solve 90% of homicides, where now they're only solving 30% because all our homicides, 60% of our homicides were illegal against illegal. And you don't know their names. You don't know who they are. You don't know who their family is. They kill and they sneak back across the border because they were killing each other. Because it's all tied to the drug trade. But some of that violence started spilling into rush hour traffic, where they're having running gun battles in rush hour traffic in a nice neighborhood. So going back to the wall, I think there's some areas that we need to put a barrier up to discourage Central Americans and Mexicans from coming down, because I like to make a humanitarian argument on why we need this, or why we need to discourage people from coming. The working human smuggling cases in Phoenix, going into these drop houses, there's 160 people, 180 people in a house. You walk in and you kick that door in, and the reason we would get tipped off is we would get a call from some family member in, say, North Carolina. Somebody in North Carolina would call and they say, hey, I paid some smugglers to get my brother across the border and get him here to North Carolina. We got a job lined up, and now they're demanding more money. We already paid. So what they're doing is they're beating my brother up over the phone, and I'm hearing it. They're beating him, and they're threatening me that if I don't pay by tomorrow, they're going to kill him, and we don't have any more money. So, or there's a female, they say, if you don't pay, we're going to rape her. And to me, how humanitarian is that? That's, so if you leave your borders wide open, if you're in Central America or if you're in some part of Mexico, life sucks. I understand life sucks. Life's not fair. But if you create a situation where you're encouraging people to make the trip to the border, there's no barriers to impede them. So you have a stampede of people coming down, and if they think they're not going to get deported, if I was down there, I'd be coming here.
Right.
I would be doing the same thing. I would be looking for a better life. But what people don't realize, when people leave Central America, because the house with 180 people, I think we only had, of the 180 people, I think there were less than 30 Mexicans. It was all Salvadorans, Hondureños, Guatemaltecos, people from all Central American countries. I think we even had a couple of people from Nicaragua. So you leave Central America, and as you get assigned to a group of guides, of smugglers, and you're coming through Central America. It's not overnight. You're coming through the railroad tracks, and at the time they would find a place somewhere where the train would stop. And in my interviews with my victims, they would tell me, no, we got on the train, and I thought, wow, I wonder if they fed them on the train. It must have been comfortable. I didn't realize, because I was new. I was a narc. I never worked human smuggling. I learned on the fly that that the train they were talking about was a box car that when it would stop in some little town, they'd get bolt cutters, open it up, throw 30 people with two or three smugglers, and here they come. So some they were throwing them on top of the train, and sometimes people fall off, and here they come all through Central America, through Mexico, and here they come. And while this is happening, they're getting abused, they're getting victimized. The women are telling us that when they left Central America, they were told start taking birth control just in case you get raped. Some of the women,
Oh my
they
goodness.
they're taking birth control. They have the morning after pill in case they get raped. Now, there's a lot of statistics out there. I don't think anybody really knows. I've heard statistics at 70%. I don't think it's that high, but 1% is too much. So
And they
when
want
we
to
would,
leave so, sorry, they want to leave so badly that they're signing up for this adventure
yes,
where, it's like, there's chances they don't even make it.
chance they don't make it, and then if they disappear,
Yeah.
it's
Who cares?
it's horrible. It's horrible because what happens is that when we were in the houses, like say we would get a call from the East Coast, the Midwest, whatever. Hey, my brother's in a house. The smugglers are asking for money. We're desperate. We don't know what else to do. So we would try to find a house, call the number, pretend we were going to make a drop off, pretend to be a family member that, hey, I'm here. I'm the point of contact. I got money for you, and try to find where this house is at. Well, when you get into the house, this what you would find with a house with 160, 180 people, 100 people, the smugglers will use. They'll go to like they're going to act like they're going to rent a house. They pick someone to look like a family unit, a woman, a man, kids, and they'll go in, rent a house in some area. They look for a house with a gate access to a rear or side yard so people don't see when the vans are showing up, dropping off all these people in the middle of the night. So when you walk into the house, all the furniture has been taken out. So you bring everybody in, everybody's sitting on the floor. You walk in, all the windows are have plywood or blankets covering, so and they take
There's
everybody's
no
shoes off.
light. There's
Yeah,
no light.
there's no lights. There's nothing. You get 180 people in a house. The toilets cannot take that many people. They stop functioning. So people start going in buckets. They start going in the bathtubs. And the stench when you hit that door and the heat of so many people. And you got people that have been walking through the desert for 2 days and 3 nights, sometimes up to 2 days and 3 nights, and they haven't been able to bathe. And they're in the same clothes, many of them that they've been wearing for weeks. And when
And
you
they
hit that
can't
door,
leave.
they can't leave till the payment is made. And sometimes some of these smugglers decide, hey, we're gonna make more money off of you. One house we go into the house and we hit a bedroom, and in the bedroom had a deadbolt, so you needed a key to get into there. So we knew there was going to be something in there. We opened the door, there's about six pretty girls in there, so you know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They got them in there. They're the smugglers. And this is, I'm telling you, it's horrible. So when I go back, why we need a wall or why we need to enforce our border, we need to do it because to me, I think it's more humane to try to discourage people from taking that trip. I mean, we if because this is the thing that drives me crazy when I see this. I see that some of these people are protesting that the treatment. Look at this ICE center. Look at these people. Those ICE detention centers are sometimes the best thing that could happen to these people because they're getting fed, they're getting medical. Now they might get deported. I don't know whatever's going to happen to them. But what happens is that the people that are complaining about the treatment at an ICE detention center say nothing about all the misery that these people are having to face from the time they leave their little village in Central America to the time they travel to war-torn Mexico where there's drug violence going on everywhere. And they're coming through, getting extorted. Girls are getting picked off. Guys are getting picked off. Hey, we need bodies. We need you to go fight with us. And here's a weapon. You're going to fight with us, and we'll, offer people jobs. And then by the time they get to the front, to the border, a lot of these smuggling groups lie to these immigrants and they tell them, hey, it's going to be very easy. It's not easy to get across sometimes. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's just a luck of the draw. And to
And word
me,
doesn't does sorry, word doesn't get out that this is like a scam, that these offerings for freedom to go to America.
they depend on people. A lot of these people are from small villages. A lot of these, people from big cities that have jobs are not taking that trip. The
No.
people that are coming are people that are extremely desperate. And overwhelmingly, almost all of these people that are coming are economic migrants. They're not fleeing. Yeah, life could suck where they're at, but for most part, when I've gone to these detention centers, I've gone to the migrant camps in Tijuana, and I've talked to people, and almost every single one are telling you, well, we're just looking for a better life, which I understand, but our sanctuary laws to claim that you're a refugee, a political refugee or whatever, it doesn't apply to economic refugees,
No.
to economic migrants. And to me, the misery that I've seen working the streets in the U.S., working in Mexico, I spent 3 years in Mexico. I think us as a country, we need to discourage at least the illegal migration to the border, because it's accompanied by misery, constant
No.
misery. And then who's making the money? Mexican organized crime is making tons of money off of this, and it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking.
And
And
so, well, sorry, what improved with the wall, and where are we now when, I don't know how many months ago we saw all of these children wrapped in foil, no COVID real restraints or precautions.
yeah, well, okay, what had happened under the Trump administration, where they did the stay in Mexico, where if you got to the border, they would register you for your asylum claim, and then they were sending you back across to these detention migrant centers that they had along the Mexican border, but you had to stay in Mexico. So what that did, it discouraged the migration from Central America and Mexico, and it slowed down to, like, I think 1 month there was like 13,000 apprehensions at the border, where right now we're up to 180,000 a month. I think the last
Right
number I
now?
saw, yeah, I think we're up to 180,000 people being detained every month right now, compared to 13,000, because the word had got out. You get to the border. Okay, what used to happen before? Uh, you got to the border, and if you claimed, I want to claim, what is it, asylum, I'm oppressed or whatever, I'm in danger. What they would do is they would process you, give you a court date, and they'd say, all right, in 3 months or whatever, you have to appear in court in Chicago. You're going to be in Chicago. Okay, here's your paperwork. You're going to Chicago, but you got to go to immigration court
So
or
they
come
let
back
them
here or
in?
whatever.
They
They would
let
let them in. They would let them in. So what has happened is, do you think they were actually going to the court? No. Once they got in, they're like, no, we're not going to court. No
And
one's going
when
to
was
court.
this happening?
This went on for years. This happened for
Under
years and
Trump
years.
or before
This
Trump? Or...
this happened before Trump. And when Trump finally said, we can't do this, because people knew that if they got across the border, the way the laws were written, that, hey, we have to wait till they get a hearing to see if they meet the asylum criteria, which they never did. Like 90%, or probably even more than 90%, did not meet the criteria, then we're going to deport you. Well, they knew that, but they were being coached by people, by the smugglers, or even some of these Catholic groups that go down to Central America and
Missionaries?
missionary, or they're not even mission, they're more like immigration. There's some of these really hardcore open borders leftist groups that go down to Central America and tell them, listen, they form these caravans, and we're going to feed you, we're going to protect you. And they come through and they have 6,000, 7,000 people, and they're coming through with giving them protection. And all of a sudden they get to Tijuana, or they get somewhere down to Texas, and they disappear and just leave these people there. And now they're screwed. So it's sad. It's really sad. So what happened when Trump came in, he said, listen, you cross the border, we're going to register you. You go back across the border, and you got to wait for your court hearing, but you're going to wait in Mexico. And people were getting discouraged. And then finally the word got to Central America. People just stopped coming. When Biden took office, he said, well, he campaigned on the message, we're going to get rid of this inhumane stay in Mexico policy. We're going to process you here, and you're going to wait for your court hearing. And next thing you know, here comes the wave of people, the stampede. Then finally they had to, after, I don't know what it was, maybe a month, they finally had Kamala Harris put in charge of that. And she made a speech. Do not come now. Well, there's too many
Yeah, I
people.
remember.
Come later.
Do
Now,
not
okay,
enter.
do
Do
not
not
enter
come.
now. Not now. Not now. But she didn't say don't come. She said don't come now. Okay, if your favorite music group is going to be in concert, and they say, hey, it's going to be you get whoever gets first here is going to sit in the front row. But they
Yeah.
say, don't come now. We don't want you in line for 2 weeks or a month. Come one day before the concert and then start a line. Do you think if you're a real fanatical and don't have a job, you're going to get there 2 weeks, 2 months ahead and wait in line so you could have the front row? That's exactly what's happening here. And right now, you have this mass migration. It's smashing records as people are coming. And like I said, so what's happening? As this mass migration is coming, it's a stampede. Imagine all the suffering that's going on. Imagine all the women that are getting raped. And then these people leave some little village in Central America, and their family thinks, well, yeah, they took off to the north. And what happens is they get killed along the way. Their family doesn't even know. They could go years without even hearing. And they just think, well, he probably started a new life and never got a hold of us. And their family could be dead.
So
Their
when she
family member
went
could.
to Guatemala, what did she really do there, Kamala?
Oh shoot! I just think it was a photo op myself. It was just she said, there's they promised money to Guatemala to, hey, we're going to give you money, and I think someone there in Guatemala said the money you give is not going to go to these. It's going to go to the political ruling class that's corrupt, and their kids can go to vacation in Europe, or if it wasn't for COVID, they would be going to Dubai. They'd go to all the vacations on the money that's supposed to be used because it's just this is the way it is in Latin America and a lot of these other countries. You give money to someone without any accountability. You think they're going to spend it on these social programs? No, they're gonna spend the money on their own families and to their buddies and to enrich themselves. That's just the way things happen down there. And that's why there's countries in such a mess to start with. And it's so going back to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was not in favor. I don't think there's a walls necessary all across the border. I think there's some areas that a wall is needed, but not all across the border. But we, the wall will not help if we do not have a strict policy here in the U.S. If you have a policy that is weak, that encourages the migration to continue coming, I mean, that wall, you can make it 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet high. People are going to find a way to get around it, to get over it. And you need to have strong policies that people realize that if they get to the border and they get picked up, arrested, they're going to get sent back home. Apply for immigration the legal way. It sucks, believe me. And I tell people this: if I lived in those countries, I would be doing the same thing. But I said, and I tell people this: I know how unfair life could be. I lost both my parents by the time I was 10 years old. But that's life. It's sad. It's difficult. I've seen the desperation in these people in these houses. My heart aches for them. But I've also worked in Haiti, and I've seen poverty that made the situation in Haiti made
Mexico.
Iraq. Haiti
Oh,
made Iraq look like paradise.
wow.
And 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 yet, and then when I was in Iraq, I had language assistants that were going out, rolling out on missions with us. To me, people that have been willing to lay their lives for our government, those people belong at the front of the line. I had people in Iraq. There's people that are having trouble getting out of Afghanistan. That when our military forces pull out, they're going to get slaughtered. And in Haiti, I had very brave patriots, Haitian citizens that were working for us. They're in danger because the kidnappers know that they work for us. And to me, if those people want to immigrate, they should be able to be put at the front of the line. It's just fair is fair. And life is not fair, obviously, but it's
No.
the immigration situation right now with this the unaccompanied minors. I mean, imagine how many of these kids are getting victimized.
I
You know,
can't imagine.
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And like I said, we just can't take uh, the whole. In a fantasy world, we'd be able to help everybody. We just can't help everyone. And we have to try. And I think our country tries to help other countries with aid in their countries by setting law enforcement, political, judicial type advisors to their countries to help them try to turn things around, but it just continues to fail.
Yeah, it's also under, if we can switch gears, I think that under the Rona, I'm curious to see, I was reading one report. On the surface, it seems like crime has gone down, but other sorts of crime, which are just not being reported because offices were closed and basically bureaucracy was shut down, is not keeping tabs, but has caused obviously a lot of disruption. And I think that has pertains to the smuggling of drugs under the coronavirus when things were locked down. I personally believe that in Minneapolis, or with regards to George Floyd and Derek Chauvin working at El Nuevo, that it was like the show The Ozarks. And if you've seen The Ozarks, it's about money laundering, and you need your like clean businesses to launder the money. But under the coronavirus, everything was closed. And so when you look at Minneapolis and when you look at Hennepin County specifically, I mean, really quickly, I was like, wow, there's a lot of fuckery in Hennepin. There's a lot of fake stuff. In Minneapolis, there's a lot of corruption. So I looked at that area, and it is the
Sinaloa.
Sinaloa
Sinaloa.
territory. And it seems like I wanted you to maybe give us, like, if you can, a little summation of the history. Because what I find interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, and you mentioned it earlier, is that the Mexican cartels it's not really a hierarchical system anymore. Sure, there's like leaders maybe supervising, but they're utilizing gang members, and they have these kind of semi-autonomous groups. So it might be harder to track who's in charge. And I also think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that the police is complacent in a lot of these operations, or they're looking the other way. Certainly with El Nuevo, there were cameras in the club, and the police had access to whatever was going on there. But conveniently, the evidence room burned down and El Nuevo burnt down. So what were on those cameras? I found one case that linked El Nuevo with a Mexican gang, Sureño, I think,
Sureños.
and Derek Chauvin. And then when I asked specifically for the incident, under appearance for the boys that were arrested, they scrubbed all appearance, which would be where the tattoos would be mentioned, where then it would be evident which gang these members are with. Why did the city scrub that? So I personally believe that's really what the story is with George and Derek, that there was a laundering operation or a counterfeit operation. No one talks about the counterfeit pills. They talk about the counterfeit bills, although no one's asked where's the source of this money coming from? Okay,
Right.
so that's a lot. Maybe we can start with just, I was looking at the history from kind of 2001 of Sinaloa and Guzman and the different heads. Do you know about them, where you can give us a little kind of overview?
Yeah, the Sinaloa Cartel del Pacifico, they have various names. Go back probably late 80s, I'm guessing. They've been around. They were just the state of Sinaloa is the Wild West, with a lot of the major trafficking families, trafficking names come from the state of Sinaloa. Is okay. You go south of Arizona. The state of Sonora butts up against Arizona, and then the next state south of it, along the Pacific Ocean, is Sinaloa. It shares a little bit of it shares a coastline,
And
but
they
the
grow poppy there for
they grow
heroin, and they grow
poppy.
marijuana.
Those are it's just they've been smuggling even before they were doing dope. They're probably involved in from any type of goods that they can steal and traffic dating way back. But they made their name doing during the marijuana days. Eventually, the groups just started growing and growing, and they got it became the Sinaloa cartel became I mean, as bigger as what they would say is what during the Pablo Escobar days of the Colombia at that time. They just became very big. And what they are, they became a federation of
Yeah.
numerous criminal groups. Uh, they a lot of people think there's one guy in some central location calling the shots. You have some leaders but the guys that are really moving a lot of the stuff are even further away from that food chain where maybe these leaders at this one spot in say Culiacan, which is a capital, are they're the ones that are organizing back into cocaine days, the cocaine loads that were coming from, from Colombia to Central America, coming through Mexico, then on to the United States. But what happened was that these groups will, like Sinaloa, will set up a distribution network not only through Mexico along leading up to the Arizona, Texas, California border, but also all through the United States. And one of the ways I like to explain this, I think, for a layman to understand, how do they get somebody? How does Sinaloa get operations in Minneapolis? How do they get operations in some place in Iowa? How does that happen? How does some of these areas where, because Sinaloa is obviously very big in Minneapolis. There was a operation where DEA headquarters in Minneapolis. I've never been there, but apparently there's some river, a big river that runs through, and on one side of the river was DEA headquarters, and on the other side was some really fancy, expensive towers. And the Sinaloa cartel distribution boss for Minneapolis had an apartment overlooking DEA headquarters, looking across when he got busted. This is probably a year and a half ago, I'm guessing. It was all over the news there in Minneapolis. But let's take it. Phoenix is one of the Phoenix and Tucson in Arizona are one of the hubs for the Sinaloa cartel. At one time, it was also a big hub for the Beltran Leyvas, who split off from Sinaloa.
In
But
2008.
yeah, around 2008, they split off. We still have Beltran Leyvas, some presence here in Phoenix. It's going to be it's a traditional presence that they've been here. They're still moving fentanyl. They're just not have the strength that they had in the heyday. So say they'll in Phoenix, they'll show up. And when I say this, I can say this from investigations, from working undercover, from doing wiretaps, debriefing, and interrogating suspects over years and years and years to this point, still able to have contacts in Mexico who feed me information. So I'll give you an example how it would occur. You have Phoenix becomes a hub, and in Phoenix, say say a group, a cell of the Sinaloa cartel will set up shop, and they're moving cocaine. They're going to move meth. Phoenix is so big, they set up what they would refer to as like a plaza boss. So they'll have a boss that's in charge of distributing cocaine to like little subgroups of this guy. So there's other guys from maybe Sinaloa, his buddies, guys that he grew up with, or people he trusts. And where's one guy that's distributing to Glendale, another one to Northeast Phoenix, downtown Phoenix. They have agreements so they don't fight, and they have territories mapped out. And they might have a couple of different, what we would refer to as plaza bosses, which they control a certain area market. And if there's any disputes, they have to settle it themselves. Sometimes these groups will fight over either dope or women. I mean, guys are still always fighting over women. They're going to fight over women. You could see these guys at the clubs. There's Mexican clubs all over Phoenix. We would do surveillance. You would show up. They would show up decked out in their high-rise trucks. You could see the leader with bodyguards, and they're walking around just openly here. That's just there's no fear. Well, say for instance, through illegal immigration, you have some guy that crossed into Phoenix. and he's a migrant field worker, or he works at a pig farm or a dairy farm, and he's in Phoenix and he hears there's work in Iowa or Minneapolis or somewhere in Minnesota. So he gets his way over there, goes to some place and starts working and gets himself, maybe even he's an illegal, but he's doing really well, making good money. He has this little, there's a small community there of a bunch of other illegals that are honest. They're here illegally, but they're working. They don't want to sell dope or anything else. So the cousin, who happens to be in Phoenix, who's a dope man, and one of the addresses, hits all the nightclubs, is a dope man, wants to go visit his cousin in Minneapolis or in Iowa or somewhere, Kansas. So he goes over to visit, hangs out with it, to take a little vacation, and he looks around, and it's a migrant farm, a dairy community, but there's a lot of Mexicans there working, hard workers. And this guy will look around and say, wow, there's a drug market here. There's a lot of us here. Who's selling dope? Who sells dope here? Well, there's some white guy over there, or there's some black guy over here who sells dope. It's not very good. Hey, we got to take over. We have a thriving Latino community, Spanish-speaking community here. There's a drug market, and we're not even dealing here. Let's find out who has this market, and we'll take it over. We'll offer them our product, and if they don't want to sell our product, we'll just eliminate them. They'll go offer their product because they could get it better, cheaper, because they got direct connections to Culiacan, and they have the pipeline. They want to establish a pipeline to this area and start distributing to the local dealers and gangs there. Usually, all right, we'll start selling your dope. But if it doesn't, all these guys have to do is call down to Phoenix, call down to Culiacan, hey, we need some muscle. So what do? They send some young men from these ranches. They want to start working. Maybe they have not been in the U.S. yet. They cross them through the desert illegally. They send them over to this place. They set up shop, and they're going to take care of business. They're going to eliminate any competition that's there. You'll see a spike in violence in an area, and next thing you know, there's a large addict population because if dope is better, they're moving it cheaper, and they'll take over a drug market. Furthermore, what happens, the same guy gets there and goes, wow, there's a large community here, but there's no carnicerias. There's no butcher shops. There's no panaderias. There's no bakeries. There's no little mini markets that sell Mexican products with a window for Western Union where we can move money. Let's get some dirty drug money. Let's open a little business. Let's open a taqueria. Let's open a taco restaurant. And we can start laundering money to this. We have a thriving community already. We've established a dope market and a pipeline. And that's how it happens all over the U.S.
So they have all these fronts. I mean, with Maya Santa Maria, she was very prominent and powerful in her community. It was a 1,600 square foot club. I've worked at a club when I was growing up. And I've gone to clubs. Every club has their resident drug dealer.
Of course.
It's his territory. They turn the other way. They know if they grease them on the way out or whatever. If you think Derek, he's wanted for tax evasion. So there was about 90,000 over a 3-year period that we know of that was unaccounted. Well, Maya says on record that she spent 20,000 for 1 year on security. So basically her entire budget was just about as much as Derek pocketed. And he also worked for another Latino club that no one's mentioned. And also think, how often do we employ a 3-time felon, George, and an off-duty cop in the same establishment? Is that a common thing? And what is the role of the city in turning away? Certainly in my case, many officials came to her rescue and said that she was her club was a necessity and served the Latino community.
Well, what happens is that I used to work when I was in between my career, when I was doing the undercover work, went to organized crime and all that, I worked a stint in the gang unit. So in the gang unit, I was a uniform, kind of a semi-uniform gang guy. And on my days off, I would work the Mexican clubs, security, the ones that we were allowed to. The reason I did it is that it was great intelligence for me. I could spot who was coming. I was getting license plates, and I was seeing guys that I knew were heavy hitters. Uh, at the time, there was a radio station in Phoenix. There still is, but it was a radio station that would play every Monday to Friday during the drive for maybe an hour or 2 hours. They would play narco corridos. You know what? They would play the Mexican folk song. They pay homage to the drug dealers of Sinaloa and Tijuana and Michoacan and all that. So
Wow.
it's like gangster rap, but for Mexican music, and it's respect to all these drug dealers. This guy grew up dirt poor in Culiacan. The song will go, this guy grew up dirt poor in Culiacan. He got in the drug business, and now he's in his segundo rancho in Phoenix, and he's rolling big time, moving dope for El Chapo or for El Mayo, and blah blah blah. He's got all the women and the fast cars and the money to spend and the mariachis. The band plays only for him in the clubs. These kids down in these ranches hear this and they go, "I want that life." They don't realize very few make it there because a lot of them get whacked, and
Yeah.
eventually, when they get there, they're eventually going to fall because it's just the way it works. But when I worked those clubs, we couldn't just go to any club. There had to be like an off-duty work coordinator who was a cop, and he would talk to some owner at a bar, and the owner would say, "I want security." So they would have to get the owner's information, submit it. They would do a background, and some of the bars they would say, "No, that place is too violent. This guy's dirty." But I worked a couple of bars that the front person was a clean person, but deep down inside, I knew because I was a narc. I knew who really ran that. I knew who really owned the place. And you work those bars, but eventually, the hard part, we had it here in Phoenix. There was some bars that we tried to close down.
Mm.
The Latino community would speak up. The politicians on the left who are part of the raza, the race coalition, start saying, "Why are you guys picking on these guys?" And they would put pressure on us, try to prevent us from closing down these bars that are taking so much manpower because the cops are having to respond to calls there. There's shootings, there's violence, and stuff like this.
It's
Uh,
exactly, sorry, it's exactly El Nuevo. There was lots of initiatives and it didn't go through. Eventually they stayed open. So I'm really curious on what is the role of the police. It may be also, let's say if you look at Cup Foods, which is the convenience store where
right.
George ended up dying. If you look at the history, it's like the police starts kind of meddling in their business and kind of giving them no choice but to have to cooperate with the cops, or else they're going to face all these fines. They arrested one of the owners, then they dismissed it. So they make it that the establishment has no choice but to give them info. Or but I still don't understand, are the cops the good guys, or in at the core are they bad and just turning the other way? I certainly think, in my opinion, Jacob Fry, or like you said, these leftists, Tim Waltz, they turn the other way. They
Let
turn the
me
other.
like something that I would say was very frustrating for us in Phoenix. Phoenix is Sinaloa cartel territory. You, you if you're a dope dealer, regardless of what nationality, race, or whatever you are, you're going to get your drugs. If you're smart, you're going to get it from a Mexican because you'd be foolish not to because you're going to pay too much if you don't. So I worked on a wiretap unit for about 7 years. We did wiretaps. So every now and then, some politician or someone, because they would see all our big investigations that were wiretap with big giant roundups, they're all involving Mexicans. The heads were all Mexicans. So finally, they said one day, "Hey, I don't remember if it was chief's office, not chief's office, city hall, mayor's office, or somebody. They're questioning why we're always picking on Mexicans. Well, we're a drug wires unit. So they said, can we do a white group or a black group? Because we would do black groups but they were the guys at the bottom moving the small amounts. The big guys are at the top where all the illegals. So what
Yeah.
we did, we said, all right, we'll prove it to you. We did a wiretap on a black gang, a street gang. And to us, they didn't even move enough drugs to justify us doing a wire, but we went up because they were violent. Within 3 or 4 days, when they ran out of dope, the main guy calls a dope house, and they're making crack cocaine, and they're saying, "Hey, we're about out of that, and we need more. We got a lot of customers. People are waiting." So what does he do? He says, "I need to go order up again." So he next phone call, he calls and he's calling the connection. And when the guy answers at the other end, what do you hear? A guy with a heavy accent, barely speaks English, and
Mexican.
you hear accordion music because he's in his truck and he's listening to his music. So now we're spinning off into a Mexican target, and that's you cannot avoid it. It's not like we're saying let's go after these Mexicans. No, Phoenix is controlled by the Mexican drug dealers. So the problem with us is that going back to Minneapolis, I have no idea. And I'll be honest, I did not read a whole lot about what was going on
Oh, there
at that
wasn't a
level.
lot written about what was really
No,
going on.
when I'm done with this, I would like you to send me some of the stuff to see. But um,
Sure.
a lot of the when you got off-duty cops working at some of these locations, you will naturally gain intel. It all depends on the cop. If the cop is a cop that is there to try and develop intelligence, not every cop does that. Some cops just don't really care. They're just there to get their money and spend their money or whatever. There's other cops that deep down inside they like to look for they use these jobs to try and get more information for their job when they're out working, because that's what I did. But see,
I,
it's because that's what the units I came from. Other guys that maybe come from patrol, they're not doing investigations. They
I
just
don't
answer radio calls. So I don't know what the situation was there in Minneapolis. I
I
really
don't
can't.
sorry, I don't think that Derek really cared to do intel. He wasn't a
Right,
detective,
right,
but he did train in the military in Germany, which is interesting what he was really doing there. But there were many times where they were constantly calling the cops. So he's an off-duty cop, but he's still a cop. It's not like he's
right.
retired. And he's calling the cops to come. And this one time where I mentioned they scrubbed the appearances of the boys, one of the boys was like straight from Mexico. He wasn't even, and it was the Sureño Club. And I wanted to touch upon something you said, which I came across is La Raza Council, which means the race.
Right.
And with Maya Santa Maria, she was not only she owns many businesses, and she also owned a radio station,
Station.
Telemundo, Minnesota. So she also has access to steer the narrative to the Latino community. And in fact, in the first days in Spanish, she said George and Derek knew each other. We were todos grande familia. And then she said that it was a sacrifice. She says it in Spanish. And then she corrects herself and she says a literal sacrifice.
Wow. Okay.
She says a literal sacrifice. She corrects
Wow.
herself again in Spanish. And then we play broken telephone. And 3 days later, they do not know each other. Even though on his
Uh,
death certificate, it says El Nuevo, and we know that Derek worked at El Nuevo. And for anyone that thinks that there is not relationship between the security officers and the off-duty, that's BS. I've seen cases in pertaining to El Nuevo where the off-duty cop has to speak to the security cop, especially someone who's 6'6", like George, who is definitely going to be the big guy in the crowd. And who hires again a 3-time felon and also off duty, and they mingle. So with La Raza, which means the race, when I looked at some of the funding of La Raza, a nonprofit, it was George Soros had funded.
of
I
course.
find it ironic, and I don't know enough about La Raza, but it's definitely about race, where as you know, we've manufactured a fake racial war with the incident of George Floyd. So what is La Raza? Have you heard of a connection between George Soros funding La Raza Council?
He we don't we have, like in Arizona, we have different groups that are similar, that are all they are, they're groups that are funded by Soros or Soros types that are open borders, sanctuary city. They promote that, and they use their money to put politicians into city hall that are, I mean, just bigoted, anti-cops. Uh, White people are racist. We Arizona was taken from Mexico. Blah blah blah. All this. But let me tell you, I grew up in inner city Phoenix. I grew up just east of downtown Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
I said I lost both my parents by the time I was 10 years old. Uh, First generation on my dad's side, second on my mother's side. Uh, the thing was that in these neighborhoods, like where I come from, sanctuary city policies, open borders hurts people like me when I was a kid, like my family. They don't hurt me now because I live in a suburb. I live in a very nice area. I don't have criminal aliens running around here, and it just doesn't happen here. I don't have coyotes like the smugglers. I have the four-legged coyotes running around here because I live in the desert. They run around here like stray dogs. But the the sanctuary city policy types that they say, okay, do not report to ICE. We're If you arrest someone, they want them released and sent back into the neighborhood to their court date, even though they're illegals. They gravitate the violent criminal aliens gravitate back to the low income areas, and they're terrorizing low income minorities, Latinos, blacks, poor whites that can't leave those neighborhoods. And these people are afraid to leave their neighborhoods at night because they're being terrorized, because it's as if a cop put somebody in a car and they're being released out the other door. Because these George Soros groups, or these groups that are the open border sanctuary city or policy La Raza groups, they get into politics. They put pressure. They have a lot of pressure because they do the music, to news stations, politicians. They get to city hall. They get to the city manager. They protest, and next thing you know, we're like, we Phoenix Police Department cannot call ICE anymore unless if you do this, because we're going to let them go. We're not going to honor ICE detention orders or detainer orders and stuff like that. But I'm telling you, I grew up in the inner city. I know people still in the inner city, and those are the people that these policies hurt the most. They don't hurt these Soros types that live in gated communities in an all white neighborhood. They hurt the disadvantaged, who are the most vulnerable. Really, they're the most vulnerable.
And it's interesting. I'm just going to talk out loud because try to formulate this thought. Um, like when I interviewed some of the brothers who own Cup Foods, they didn't really. They're like, we're Arabs, we're Palestinian. This has nothing to do with us. It's interesting the what maybe underneath the surface really happened, having to do with Mexican gangs when the George Floyd ended up being a manufactured race war, which at the end Keith Ellison said a big fuck you to the world by going
Right.
on 60 Minutes and saying this had nothing to do with race, which we all knew, whoever was really paying attention. So, what could be the role of a Mexican cartel? From what I hear, they employ bribery, they employ violence, they have jurisdiction over the politicians. Um, so what is the relationship also of using, let's say, black gangs? Like there's the Bloods in that area, but yet there's a mention of Sureño, which I don't know, maybe you don't know either, its impact or influence in that neighborhood, because that
So
neighborhood is mostly black. It's not Mexican necessarily, Powder Horn in Minneapolis. I don't know where the Latinos are coming from necessarily. So I
Yes.
don't know if that makes sense, but I'm looking to do they use these smaller groups regardless of race, whether they're mostly Black or Latinos, to do their dirty work for them?
To move their dope. They used them to move their dope. These black gangs the leadership of the black gangs will enrich themselves. You'll get some guys in those black gangs that become high rollers. They are moving, they're buying car lots, they're buying property, and everybody else below them, they get crumbs. They get crumbs. So what happens is that, see, like say Sinaloa will set up shop in Minneapolis. They take over the market. However far back they took over that market, and they have a thriving business now. They have Plaza Boss, they have enforcement people, they set up money launderers, uh, they set up a whole operation. Well, they need distributors. They got a lot of drugs coming in. They need distributors. So what they're going to do is they're going to reach out to Mexican American gangs. They'll reach out to black gangs. They'll have white people, whoever. But there's always going to be like a distributor that's maybe in the black gang, maybe one or two guys, maybe depending on the side of Minneapolis, that will be the point of contact with this Mexican distributor in Minneapolis. So he gets the bigger amounts of dope. He breaks them down into smaller amounts and distributes them to another dealer, to another sub dealer. And next thing you know, you got guys at the street level. If you look at what happens in Chicago, you look at all over the US where you see this violence that's happening, it's not gangs just fighting over gangs. They're fighting over the lucrative street drug market. And that is being fueled by Mexican drug cartels that set up shop. And you got street gangs uh, fighting over a street block, fighting over the drug sales of a big, large apartment complex. There could be a large apartment complex that is worth a lot of money to them. There could be a bar. And that's where you have the violence. They're not fighting over, for most part, they're not fighting over, well, you're a Crip, I'm a Blood. They're fighting over, you're a Crip, I'm a Blood, but we're going to sell dope in your neighborhood and we're going to eliminate you. A lot of the violence that happens is, I'm telling you, it's fueled by, people don't see it that way, but it's fueled by Mexican drug cartels because they're
Yeah.
fighting for the right to sell that lucrative street market, to control the lucrative street market.
Up until, I mean, even just doing like a deep dive, but for me, I really like to, I would have to do a thesis now to really like, oh, how is this Sinaloa
Right.
cartel? So I'm doing like a crash course, but I can infer that there's a corridor that involves California, that involves Texas. He came from Texas, George. He also was a truck driver. So who knows what he was driving when he was arrested in 2019, just a year exactly. He was caught with oxycodone, which is also a Sinaloa drug. And he had 274 pills on him. So I think he was a low level drug runner. But I don't know how they view people who get high on their own supply and get a little bit sloppy. So if everything was closed down and there was fake cash, and George was getting antsy and could have said, hey, you guys need to take care of me. I can't get another job. I'm a 3-time felon. No, George can't do anything because we have to keep a low profile because of the coronavirus. All essential businesses are closed. We can't have any activity. Maybe he threatened, maybe he got sloppy, maybe he was set up by Maurice, and Maurice was the black guy that was with him. And most people don't know, but Maurice tried to buy an iPad earlier that day with fake cash, $180. Nobody called the police on Maurice. Then 15 minutes before, Robert, or 10 minutes before, he tried to buy a pack of cigarettes with a fake 20. And his fake 20, the way in which he did it was so obvious that it was rejected. And then I asked people, does George Floyd smoke cigarettes? I don't think so. It wasn't in his autopsy. And when I asked Chris Martin, who took the 20 from George, oh, So Maurice tried to buy a fake some cigarettes. What kind of cigarettes did he try to buy? Oh, the exact same Newport menthols. So I don't know what was really going on there, but certainly they wouldn't. Nobody likes someone that gets sloppy or gets high on their own supply.
A couple of answers or comments to what
Yeah.
you've said. I'll go
Yes.
back first where I talked about how the violence is fueled by Mexican drug cartels. Another thing that people don't ever, never even think of, you have a thriving drug business, fueled by Mexican drug cartels. They're supplying. So what will you get? You'll get a lot of addicts. You have a large addict community. When you become so addicted, you cannot work. So what does that person have to do? That person has to start doing uh, organized shoplifting, like massive shopliftings, or what we call boostings. They start doing burglaries at residences. They start doing commercial burglaries, or they start doing. They start. Some will buy small amounts of dope if they're not so addicted, but they'll sell some of theirs. They'll sell a small amount and then feed off of that. But once you become a full blown addict, you're having to resort to violence to support your habit, and people don't see that. So you got burglaries, car thefts, break-ins, everything. And when these people, I worked in a store. I think I mentioned, I sent you an email. I worked in the storefront unit. My job was we ran a fake pawn shop. We ran a fake body shop, an apartment. My job was what they call a scout. This is after I left the drug unit. So I would go out on the street. I had worked drugs, so I knew where all the drug addicts hung out. I'd go hang out in an apartment complex, walk around, and somebody would see me. They think I was looking for dope. Hey man, what are you looking for? Well, somebody just called me, said they had back then they had some VCRs, they got some TVs, or they got some guns to unload. Oh, you buy guns? Yeah. Well, I get guns. And next thing you know, they're calling me and I'm taking them to the storefront and we're buying hot guns that they just ripped off in a residential burglary. Or they hit a gun shop in the middle of the night, or they hit a construction yard and took construction stuff. So when I did that, these people are stealing to support a drug habit. They're not putting their kid through college. They're not paying their rent. They're not, it's it's strictly to
They're
support a drug
desperate.
habit.
They're
Yeah, they're
addicts.
desperate,
They're
and they
desperate. They're addicts.
yes, yes,
That
desperate addicts. And so when they would show up to us with a brand new car that they just ripped off, we're paying them $300 $400 for a car, a brand new car they just ripped off. That's all we're paying. And they were like complaining and say, "Hey man, I know somebody that will give me 2,000 for this." And we would say, "You know somebody that would give you 2,000? You're talking to a fucking cop." And then they would get scared, and then they would sell it to us for 300, even though we were the cops. We're not going to buy, because we're not going to arrest them. We're going to let them go, and we're going to arrest them later. We're going to buy several cars off of them, then take them down later on.
okay. So I want to ask you this: how do you recruit a snitch? Because I think that George and Maurice could have been snitches. Just so you know that Alexander Kang, who's one of the officers, who's black by the way, filed a motion to get everything on George Floyd in connection to him being an FBI snitch or a gang member.
Yeah, the snitches that we would recruit could be. When I worked undercover, I had snitches that didn't know they were snitches. We called them unwitting informants. They think I was a really legit bad guy. So their job, they thought I was a real crook. So they would take me to introduce me to their buddies, thinking I was a legit guy. And when they'd introduce me to their buddy, I'd pay them. So they thought they were like part of my crew, not realizing I was a cop. But regular snitches, if you're a patrol guy, you pop somebody with a dope pipe or you some paraphernalia or a small amount of dope. And sometimes they're desperate because if they're an addict, the last thing they want to do is go to jail because they're going to get
You could
sick.
tell George did not want to go back to
Right.
jail.
Yes. And he, the paranoia, everything that he was, they start hyperventilating. I watched a video of George Floyd, and we've talked about this. I've done some other podcasts where, as a cop, uh, it's your responsibility. You put hands on a prisoner, on somebody, you're going to arrest him. He's your responsibility. If he goes into distress, you have to give him medical aid. You don't sit around and wait till an ambulance gets there. I mean, come on, we get
Right.
training in that. And that
Right.
was one of the big problems I
Yeah.
had is that you get people that are addicted to drugs. They have, I've arrested guys that were high on crack that they're running down the street. We tackle them and they think Satan's running after them. And in their mind, they're probably, maybe they just see a demon. They saw the demons running after them and they're yelling and screaming. They're crazy, but you have to try to calm them down. And if somebody tells you I can't breathe, you got, the handcuffs. George was a big guy. I don't know if they double cuffed him, but normally in a big guy
No.
will double. You put double cuffs because if you put single, you're restricting their breathing. It's hard for them to breathe. I've been
It's
handcuffed in undercover situation. It's hard to breathe. It
it
really
did,
is.
I mean, also if you're having a panic attack, if you've
Yes.
taken bad drugs, what I don't understand is, well, at one point George says, if I start breathing again, it's going to go off. I don't know what he means. And then
Right.
at one point, after Derek is on the scene, he says twice, he know it, but I don't know who he's referring to. But when I look over and over again for any, like, okay, these guys worked at the same place. I don't care what you say, a 6'6" guy is kind of recognizable, especially when you've worked there for 17 years.
Right.
But when they meet each other, when there's, sure, maybe George didn't acknowledge him because he was high and didn't recognize it was Derek. And then I think, like, I looked at Derek the whole trial, and he knows how to keep a poker face. Maybe he's a sociopath, and that's why there's no emotion. But that's the one thing of how don't we see a recognition? It could have been straight up a dirty cop that knew he was going to be filmed and could be so brazen and do it because it's going to set off this event. Because I've had also a couple of people on the inside say George wasn't really supposed to die. So that's also a weird comment to tell me he wasn't really supposed to die. So maybe it went awry, but I don't know how they didn't show. There was no recognition.
To the officers' reactions, if you have any experience in courtrooms, you're trained not to show any emotion, because you don't want the jury to start looking at you and thinking that you're taking it personal. Really, it's you do your job. And in his situation, it was different because he's a defendant. But obviously, you're going to be trained to just try not to start. You get a lot of people that are not experienced in a courtroom and they're rolling their eyes and going, "Come on," and all this, and it looks bad for a jury.
Like
Okay,
Shawanda.
yeah, yes, but if you go back to George Floyd, I just think he was. I mean, he had fentanyl in his system. He had methamphetamine, and that's like the meth is speeding up your heart. The fentanyl is trying to slow you down. The guy was, he was having looked like he was having some type of panic attack. He was under a lot of stress, um, and worked himself up. I mean, I just think it was he died. It was an accident that he died, but those officers should have given him some type of first aid. They should have started working on him sooner. And to me, with Derek with the foot on the back of his neck, is like, come on, you could hear he's saying, "I can't breathe." You gotta try to make him. You gotta do something. And as we say, as that's your prisoner, he's your responsibility, and
Yeah, but
it's
he
your
knew. So
responsibility.
imagine he knew him though, Robert.
Yeah,
Like
yes.
imagine he knew him. So could it be a brazen? He's looking straight at the camera because someone had told me this one theory is that it was a ploy. He wasn't supposed to die, but they were going to do like a Rodney King type event to also, in the end, validate the spikes and then also kind of help. They sold it as like we're going to help get the virus under control, and then maybe, I don't know, it went awry. I just find it hard to believe that he continued, um, after George kind of passed out.
Now, I don't know how it is in Minneapolis. In Phoenix, I told you I work the bars, and I work a bar where our job was the bar security's job was to be inside the bar. We were outside. We kind of would stand off to the side. We were just a presence. And if the guys inside needed help, they would call us and then we would go in. They didn't want us inside the bar because they didn't want us to scare anybody. You know, in the bars I worked, almost everyone in there, it was a huge percentage illegals were in there because it was a Spanish speaking bar. So they
Mhm.
wanted us off to the side. So
Okay.
we knew who the security guys were by sight, but a lot of them never really talked to us except for maybe one or two. You know, if they needed our help, we'd go over and help. And same thing in that bar. We had Spanish speakers and we had a couple of black guys. And the guy that owned the bar, may he rest in peace, he's passed away. He was an FBI informant at one time. Or no. He was a DEA informant. He was a smuggler at one time, got popped, got clean. Who knows where he got the money, opened a small little bar. And I don't think a lot of people knew. We knew because I knew because I worked drugs. And I don't think he realized that I knew what he had done before because he had done that years ago. And the old DEA guys had told me, oh, yeah, that guy, he worked for us. That's how he got out of going to prison. He did some cases and then went legit and got scared and eventually died a broken man. I mean, he lost that bar because that bar had a lot of problems. And the city of Phoenix finally closed him down. And when he passed away, he lived. He was almost. I mean, he was living in just a shack. And but the security guys, I knew who they were, but I knew them at sight. I don't know how it was there in Minneapolis because every place could be different. But they just wanted to stay away from the bar. Uh, we would stand off to the side and we would just hang out in front of the bar and talk amongst ourselves. And if they needed help, we'd walk
Sure.
around to the back. We'd come back to the front and we would just rotate. But
I
we,
think you'd recognize a 6'6"
oh,
black guy. And the
of
one
course.
black guy who, David Pinney, who said that they knew each other and they bumped heads, George and Derek, then a
Yes,
couple of
yes,
days later said he mixed George up with another black guy, which is a racist comment, especially when that black guy's your boss, dude. You know, it's
yes,
like,
yes.
really?
And the,
So that's a little bit, it's all it's all bizarro. It's fascinating, it's bizarre. So when I talk to you about recruiting a snitch, so if you think, I told you this guy Maurice that most don't know tried to buy this iPad. That's not public information. It's one of the owners who told me, and then I shared with you that he tried to buy the same pair of
yes,
cigarettes with a fake 20. So this guy ends up like fleeing Minneapolis, and then he's caught in Texas, let's say June 2nd. So on June 3rd or 4th, the case is sealed, it's dismissed. He is found to have the beginnings of, quote, intellectual disability, mental illness, and he's let out. Then he pleads the fifth, and he has a court case coming up. And when he's out on the street, because there's a lot of footage that didn't make it into public, people don't know, he's across the street being babysat by the park police officer. He says a total of 10 times to this officer and another officer, ask Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam knows me. Mr. Adam knows me. Who's Mr. Adam? Mr. Adam is the manager of Cup Foods, but the press doesn't tell you, and Cup Foods doesn't tell you, he's not just a manager, he's an owner. And he's the one who called, who said for them to call 911. Initially, they tell the world that this employee took it upon himself to call 911, an African, probably paid under the table boy immigrant. That's not true. So why, like, what's Mr. Adam going to do to you unless you're protected somehow? Because now you're roaming free, and in my opinion, you've sold George bad drugs before. You likely sold him drugs that day that could have been bad, and you're roaming free when you tried to buy an iPad with fake money.
Yes, the oxy, the fentanyl. He had fentanyl in the system, so what he probably bought is what is referred to as Mexican oxy.
Which
Okay,
is fake.
it's fake. It's fake. It's not real. They're made in a lot of them are primarily made in these labs, these crude labs in Culiacan or outside of Culiacan, Sinaloa. They get the chemicals from China. They come in. They set up shop. They've learned how to make these pills. Now
Standards.
there's no standards. So what happens is when they make these pills, when by the time they look like the oxy, but they're not. They have a different color too, but they got the stamp and everything else. Some people in the U.S. believe they're buying oxy. Some people know they're buying bullshit. But uh, just a thing that I did on this, I did some research. I think it was about a year ago, year and a half ago. DEA did a survey of fentanyl seized all across the U.S., different offices. And they did a test, like a quantitative analysis test to see what's the percentage of fentanyl in each pill. They found out of seizures nationwide, I think it was 27% had what could be considered a lethal dosage of fentanyl in these pills. 27%. You're playing Russian roulette with these pills. Now, it's 27% based on your body side, your tolerance. George Floyd is a big dude, so his was probably a little higher, and he's probably been using it for a while, but still, he also was on meth. He was under distress. He's probably having some type of episode, you combine everything together. But the fentanyl pills, I was shocked when I read that, and that's why we have so many people dying of overdoses. I mean, throughout the United States,
Yeah.
27% pills seized nationwide during I think it was about a 3 month period.
Yeah, so
That's
Robert, why is no one asking where that fake money and more so where that fake drug came from? No one has talked about the counterfeit drugs, and it's really an emblem of what, happened to George. It's an emblem of a fentanyl dependency,
Yep.
and maybe we can talk about like these counterfeit pills that are flooding the market that are coming from the Mexican cartels. Up until I did this search, I was like, damn, Mexican cartels have a really big role in this war on drugs.
Just last week, I think it was in Portland or somewhere in the Northwest. They got a Mexican guy with 100,000 fentanyl pills in his car. 100,000. Imagine if 27% of those have a lethal dose. Here in Phoenix, they caught. I mean, on my Twitter, I'll send it to you after we get
Yeah.
offline, but I'll send it to you. I follow the fentanyl problem. It's something I don't say it interests me, but it concerns me because here in the neighborhood where I live, there was a star baseball player at the high school 2 years ago, pitched a game, got his team to the state championship game. That in a couple of days, he got home, grabbed a pill that thought was an oxy to relax, took it, and he died in his sleep. And this happens everywhere, but it just people. And I agree with you. Um, to me, we should be screaming from the rooftops. We know where these drugs are coming from. And I think the problem that a lot of people look at these drugs, they think, oh, they're just drug addicts dying. It's regular people. A lot of people got hooked on oxy because the doctors were overprescribing. I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and I remember the doctor gave me like 20 pain pills, 20 of them. And I
I
don't remember
believe
what it
you.
was. He gave me 20 back then. And I took one, and it made me feel so crazy that I threw the rest away. I said I'd rather the pain and take an Advil or whatever
Absolutely. What
than
wimps
to
do.
deal with that.
I
Yeah,
just
so
had surgery a week ago, and I had to tell the anesthesiologist, do not put fentanyl I don't want fentanyl. I
Yeah.
don't want morphine. Then they told me also, okay, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z. And I said, what's that? It's pain. So you're giving me pre-pain before I've even had the pain. You're going to prep me for the pain? No, I don't want your fucking drugs. I don't
Yes.
want your
Yes.
drugs. Uh,
Yes. The
so
I think you got a lot of people that got hooked on drugs that are, they're not like your street drug addicts. They're regular people that got addicted to these drugs, and then now they can't get them, and then there's some street guy says, "Hey, I can get you some oxy," and they don't realize how dangerous these pills are, and they're taking these pills and they're just dying, and I mean,
yeah,
it's tragic. And yet it gets very little. There's very few people that are really talking about it. And
right.
the fentanyl is being driven by Sinaloa and Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación are the two main ones. Also here in
That's the
Phoenix,
CRJ. Sorry, what's the?
CJ&G.
And
They're
they're
another one.
rivals, right?
They're rivals. And also here in Phoenix, there's some Beltran Leyvas people, some leftovers that are still moving the fentanyl. But one of my partners just retired, an old partner of mine. He retired from Phoenix PD. He did about 37 years on the PD. Retired. I did 23 and a half, and I got the hell out. He did 37. He was buying dope still. He was on light duty, so he couldn't go out. He was doing negotiations in Spanish with fentanyl dealers and having another officer going out and buy them. But he was telling me, he says, right now, in my generation, you would go to any Circle K, a 7-Eleven, and there were people selling dope in front of those convenience stores. You could get anywhere. And right now, it's the fentanyl is everywhere.
And so
It's
how is this guy Maurice that sold him the fentanyl? How is he out and about, and why is he not an accessory to murder when he really is?
I wonder if they flipped him. That's because right
Right.
now, when you told me that, I said, okay. Um, I wonder if they made him into if he snitched, if he rolled over, it just hasn't been disclosed. I don't know. Because like I said, I did not. I'm listening. I'm learning a lot from that case because I didn't, I didn't watch the trial. I did watch the video and I watched some of the stuff that happened. And like I said, like most of us, it was disgusting what happened. George Floyd was a bad person, but he did not deserve to die.
Sure. No.
He had a troubled life, but he did not deserve to die. And
Well, Derek's dead too now.
yep, yeah,
He's pretty dead. I mean, it's one of the owners of the Cup Foods who said that Maurice is a known drug dealer snitch. However, I don't know if he was a snitch or he just became a snitch, given what I told you of releasing and sealing the case and him pleading the fifth. He was wanted in Minneapolis for domestic strangulation and was arrested as a out of state fugitive and supposedly has a case for that domestic abuse in September, but he's seemingly free of being an accomplice. So I also find that the fact that nobody is like, well, let's see, where did that fake money and those, no one says they're fake, but it's fake pills. Let's go to the source. So the fact that nobody cares to go to the source from the government, Minneapolis, or police, and no one's or the media, then what does that say? What's their role?
the money should have been taken. If counterfeit money, the Secret Service should have gotten involved. So I'm guessing I mean, I don't. I
Mm.
wonder how good the money was. Was it really good looking money? Because
No, it
there's.
was super Mickey Mouse fake
Oh,
money
okay.
that Chris
Yeah.
Martin told me I can't even, it's like the most fake money I've ever seen.
Because I've
So
seen
what's
some really
that?
good. I've seen some really good fake money that it's hard to even tell. And I've seen some stuff that, like you said, they might as well just put
Oops.
a picture of Mickey Mouse on there. So yeah, um, yeah.
Why use so obviously fake money? And I don't know why they took George's attempt when it was just rejected 10. It's like, let's say I come with fake money and then I'm with a friend and then the friend comes 10 minutes later. Hello, we're together.
Yes, yes.
What how are you taking that his money? And then even Chris Martin said that he was going to absorb the cost because, they go, also this, Robert, they go out twice to the car, right? So think, you tell your employee, you tell your nephew, he sends his nephew and the other guy, a 16 and an 18-year-old, to deal with, okay, they're regulars, but they're also kind of crooked. So he goes once, and George is supposedly, the story goes that he took Percocet, which I also don't believe he was taking, but he was having a little snooze. So they're talking to Maurice, and Maurice takes the second time around. Maurice takes, and you probably haven't seen this footage, but it's there. Maurice takes the fake 20 and throws it on the ground and basically says, "We're square." So if you were with your friend that you've known for years, wouldn't you be like, "Here's the 20, here's the cigarettes, leave us alone. It's Memorial Day,"
Yeah,
right?
yes, yes.
And also, why are you hanging out for 23 minutes when you know that you've done something weird? Unless you're setting George up for something. Why don't you leave? You know you used fake cash, right?
Yeah, yes. I don't, the whole thing doesn't make sense, but I think also when you got people on dope, they don't make sense either. So it's like, it's the I saw a lot of the, I saw some of the footage. I did, more than anything, I read summaries of what was going on during the trial. And I mean, to me, it was like just like a recipe for disaster. But I thought the thing that was a little weird was, how did you claim, if you guys worked together, how did you claim you did not know him? That was the thing that was, I mean, like, and you said, he's a,
Who wasn't together?
that Derek did claim that, they try to say that, well, he didn't know that it was, he didn't know George Floyd, but they worked together, and he was a big dude. I mean, it's hard to miss him.
Well, no one's
So
asked Derek. No, it was never
right,
brought up, right? It was
right,
completely killed. That story was completely killed, which to me is a red flag. That it wasn't explored or explained. Well, it was, I guess, and then CBS, David, the journalist who interviewed the black guy, it's a 50-minute interview. But when I went to source it so I can see it, they can't license it to me because it hasn't been aired. And also, if you think, Robert, all of this is evidence, all this footage. So if you have, Dragon Walk was one of the surveillance, and Rashid, a young black, probably lefty business owner, ends up selling it to the Washington Post and to networks. You're selling evidence. And now, if I go to try to source that footage to see it, I can't. It's not, you can't source the surveillance footage. So you
right,
are making money because you're selling it. You made money, to set the record straight that there was no resisting. When I looked at the body cam footage that finally came out 2.5 months later, when I looked at it, I'm like, this is an adult. This is not adulting. He's acting like a little whiny bitch.
right.
At one point, he's on the floor and he says, "I think I need some water." Imagine I did that. "Hey, cops, can I order some food?" Hello, you're being arrested, right?
Right, right.
So it's all very bizarre unless it's kind of orchestrated for a purpose. And what would be the role of a Mexican cartel in, like, maybe you can tell me a little bit about what is the relationship between the Mexican cartel and cops? I mean, is there a lot of dirty cops?
To me, if there's dirty cops like here in Phoenix, they're gonna get discovered. I think most of the time, the with the Mexican drug cartels, they stay away from cops. They stay away from us. They know we're after them, but we will make them snitches when we pop them if we can. But I think the connection's going to be. I mean, obviously, Sinaloa cartel. If it's fentanyl in that town, they're going to have. It's going to be their fentanyl. Now, it's probably going to be some street level dealer, and he could be removed 3, 4, 5 times from the actual source, maybe even more, because you get one guy here and he sells to this guy, he sells to this guy, he sells to this guy. By the time it gets to the street level, they don't even know who the supplier is. They know it's probably some Mexican guy, but they don't know the supplier. You know, they wouldn't know who he is. So it's as far as I don't know anything about Minneapolis. I've never even been there, but as what I can speak is from here. Uh, During my career, when I worked drugs, I think we lost two guys that got fired, and in my career lasted 23 and a half years, so we lost two guys. So
To what? To death or to
no, no, no,
being
no.
a snitch?
We lost two guys, two cops. One
To the bad
got
side.
the bad side to the bad side. Yeah, we lost two guys to the bad side, and one of them was having some financial issues, and he stole some money, and he got
Could
caught. He got outed, but he got turned in.
could it be also that the Minneapolis police, I know you don't know this, but maybe
Right.
they're corrupt to the core and they had this guy worked for 17 years for this club. That's a long
No,
time.
yeah, but I think okay, but what I've seen as a cop, okay, he worked 17 years. Uh, I worked off duty. I didn't work a whole lot off duty because to me, maybe there, I don't know how the retirement system is. I would much rather work city overtime where I'm actually not working at a club because a club will pay you under the table.
Right.
That doesn't go into your pension. It's instant gratification that you're getting paid under the table. But to me, it's foolish if you work 17 years at a place that's not helping your pension. To me, instead of working that side job at a club, I would much rather work overtime because the overtime goes into the calculation for my pension. And that's why I was able to retire at 23 and a half years with, a pretty comfortable pension because, but I knew guys that they like working the clubs because, okay, say if you work overtime at a police department, you're busting your ass. You're writing reports, you're arrested, you're doing investigations, you're working. You can go work at a club and you can just stand at the front of the door and do nothing for years and not ever hardly ever write a report. You let the local security or the business security take care of everything, and you're just standing out there fighting boredom. But at the end of the day, that's not going to help your pension.
Yeah,
And to me,
he yeah.
I tell young officers, try to stay away from doing the off duty, do city overtime because that will help the calculation of your pension and that will help you much more than the
And
instant gratification.
when you do off duty, you're using the city's police car?
Yeah, sometimes they'll allow you to use a city police car, but you're still getting paid by them. But you have to have a permit, it's licensed, blah, 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 but they're paying you. The club is going to pay you, and it's not counting as your income. And to me, like I said, foolish. It's foolish to do. I mean, I did some off duty, but I can't say I did no 17 years at the same place. But I know guys that did that. I know guys on my PD that were lazy. I'll say this. They were lazy. They wanted to work a job where they didn't have to do anything. They made good money working off duty jobs. And then when they retired, their pensions, they're struggling because they didn't work the overtime and what we call the high three. You got to get a high 3 years. So they'll get your high three earning years and they'll use that percentage for your pension. And some of these guys never hit a high 3 year. When I was doing the wiretaps, I was working 3, 4 months in a row without a single day off, working 12-hour shifts, sometimes working a 24, 30-hour shift because we were nonstop. Where you work an off-duty job, those guys, there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of cops that just do the off-duty stuff. They get comfortable. Like I said, you don't do a lot of work. And they get comfortable and they just like doing that. But all those guys that do that for a long time, their pensions did not come out very well.
I mean, he worked for another Latino, I think a couple of places, and then again, he was also a real estate agent in an entirely different state of Florida.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how he was doing real estate and off duty and actual full-time
Right.
job. But I know that there was corruption at El Nuevo, and whether he was sourcing it for the cops, I don't know what he was doing with that info for good or for bad. Um, it seems like
I,
there's a lot of corruption in that in Minneapolis, in Hennepin,
yeah,
beyond.
I
Yeah.
just realized I
Yeah.
gotta I have to cut it short here.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
We
I
were
didn't
talking
realize,
for
but
almost 2
but
hours.
but if you ever need me to come back on and chat, or we can talk to me on the phone, I'm more than willing to help you out.
Robert, this was so amazing. Thank you. I think that my audience will find it fascinating. I hope so. I sure do. God bless you. Thank you. And yeah, if I have any other, I might have some questions for sure. But
Send me
thank you.
send me some stuff to read, because I told you I'm not going to come here and say that I know what actually happened on the inside, because I just didn't really read anything
Yeah.
except little summaries. Feel free to send me anything, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. Um, with the George Floyd case, like I said, one of the things as a cop that I talked to all my partners, and we've seen it, the video, and we said it was horrible because number one rule: if you put hands on someone, he belongs to you. He is now your responsibility. And if you do not take action, you have to go into life-saving mode at that point. And they didn't do that. And it was like, to me, I just thought, I never saw it as some conspiracy. I saw it as just not doing their job. They failed. They
Well, I just
failed big
say,
time.
you know, was
But
it
I
just a series, Lemony Snicket's, a series of unfortunate events?
Yes, but
Is
I don't
that
know all the inside, because I didn't do the deep dive as you have. But like I said, if you need anything else, feel free to reach out. And thanks for having me on.